And here we go. So first you're going to put just a bit of black acrylic paint on your disposable plate that you're going to be using as a paint palette. You're going to grab a little bit of white acrylic paint. Alrighty, notice how I put the black and the white completely separate because we're going to use the middle part of the plate to mix both colors. Here we go. So I put the brush into the water to just kind of lubricate the bristles in the brush a bit. So that's why it's looking a bit watery in the beginning. And this is something that I advise beginner painters to do. You know, you're going to frequently be putting the brush into the water because you'll notice that the bristles will start to stiffen up a little bit. And you want those bristles nice and loose. And so I just kind of mixed up the black and white to give kind of a gray tone, just to kind of draw in where I'm going to paint the blending bar. That's what I call it. And just to kind of give it a base coat of where I'm going to start to add the paint. So right now I'm just kind of generally applying paint to where I want the blending bar to go. And as you can see, the top part of the bar is going to be the darkest. I don't go right away with the black paint. I kind of lay a foundation of a medium gray, and then I'm going to slowly start to build up on the colors. So acrylic paint is fun, but the main rule that you have to remember is that the acrylic paint does dry very fast. And so you'll find that you'll have to blend relatively quickly, because before you know it, what you have been painting has already been dry. And so again, this being a beginner how to blend paint, I figured we can start with just the black and white. So I'm using my rag to kind of get off the little bit of the paint that I have on the brush. And you'll find you do that from time to time. So now I'm starting to add a little bit of white onto the black paint, and that's going to start to blend both of those paints together. So again, this is a challenge in itself because I do notice throughout the years of teaching, beginner painters do get a bit frustrated with acrylic paint the first time they use it. And so I have to let them know that this being a new medium for them in particular, you have to be patient with the paint. Alrighty, so I'm going to be slowly adding the white to lighten up the gray. And as we get lower and lower in the blending bar, I'm going to add more and more white to it. Now, I will be from time to time going over what I just painted, and that's totally normal. This being acrylic paint, you have to be patient with the medium. I find that putting on a good music in the background to help relax, and before you know it, you'll fall into the process of just enjoying what you're doing. Now at this point you can start to see that I'm bringing out the black a bit more. So I'm applying more of the acrylic paint on the top part of the blending bar, and then slowly start to integrate that with the gray. Again, this is the part where it depends on how fast you are as a painter, but you'll notice that you're painting right on top of something that you're not able to blend. And so you have to consider that as you develop your own style and your own technique. You kind of have to be a bit patient. Again, that is the word when it comes to acrylic paint, because it is a wonderful medium once you get a good handle on it. Like any medium, when you're first introduced to it, it can be a bit frustrating in the beginning, and that's just with any challenge. It's never correct, it's never perfect the first time you do it, but the more you attempt to perfect your technique and style, the better you acquire the new skill, especially when it comes to individualistic style. That people often ask me, how do you come up with your style? It's not from one day to the next you have a style. It's a gradual growth. And so you'll find that the more you paint, the more you draw, the more you use any type of medium, whether it's soft pastel, oil pastel, crayons, markers, doesn't matter. What matters is that you continue to develop your style, and that's something that's just going to develop over time. So right now, I'm going back and forth, just kind of making sure that I have a good mixture going, I have a good blend going. So the point is for you to be comfortable with the medium. And so however long it takes is however long it takes. Everyone is different. So just know that you have your process. So it might take you 20 minutes. It might take you 40 minutes. Timing is not that important. What's important is for you just to enjoy the process. Right now I'm going up and down with larger strokes, and you can see I'm starting to get to a point where I think I like the blend, how it's going. The black part is the darkest dark, and that's pretty much how I like how it's blending towards the gray. I noticed that there's two types of gray. There's a dark gray and a light gray, and so I'm pretty happy with how that looks. And so once you're happy with that part of the blending bar, you can go ahead and do what I'm doing, and that's just adding straight white out of the tube and making the bottom part of the bar bright white, and then slowly start to blend that. And of course, you have to be relatively fast when you are blending with acrylic paint, because you'll find, just as I did when I first started to paint with acrylic, is that it dries very fast. Even if you have a good blend going, before you know it, it's dry. So just keep that into consideration when you're doing this type of challenge. So at this point, I decided that I'm happy with the blending bar, as I call it. And so we're going to switch over to the main challenge, which is painting a sphere with a light source. And all that means is, say for example, there's a light hitting the sphere, creating a shadow and a cast shadow. So I have another video that's called sketching and drawing basic shapes. And in those videos, I show you this example, but with pencil. And it shows you the fundamentals of how to draw a sphere and how to blend it. But in this case, we are painting with acrylic. And so as you can see, I just kind of watered my brush and started to layer in the paint. So if you notice where I put the white, that is where the light is hitting the sphere. And so that's going to be the brightest white of the painting. The rest is going to gradually turn into a light gray, a medium gray, and of course black, which is why we started with the blending bar to the left. So now that you have some sort of painting experience from the practice from blending the bar, now this becomes the real challenge. And so right now I'm just kind of layering a bit of paint, a little bit of white, a little bit of gray, just to kind of apply the medium onto the canvas. And so once it's applied, then I'm going to blend in a bit more black, and you'll find that this is going to be a repetitive process. It's going to be a repetitive technique. You can see my palette. It's going to get pretty messy. And as you notice, I go from black to white. And here in this technique is something that I recommend everyone do, is you blend in a circle so that it looks realistic. So, in the beginning, the more realistic the painting is, the better the result. And so I found that when you do paint in circular strokes, it helps maintain the shape of the sphere versus painting up and down or left and right. In this case, we want to make it as realistic as we can, and so that requires a circular technique. So you'll see that is how I am blending. So make sure that when you're outlining these paints, you take your time, of course, and it requires a steady hand in the beginning. And so it's up to you as the artist. You can always start off with a pencil drawing, if that helps. So it's always nice to kind of bring out those pencils and draw in the sphere. You could even blend it in, but the lead always kind of makes it a bit messy. So this is why I went in right away with the painting, with the paintbrush. It's a sketch of a painting, and so I'm not too worried about making it, hyper realistic. I'm not super worried about making it, so realistic. Just kind of enjoying the process, and I want you all to enjoy your process, and so just make it as best you can. This technique is fun to use with multiple colors if you'd like. I found that just starting with black and white is a good base to start from. And of course, if you get better with painting in black and white, you become more confident in your painting abilities. And of course, you'll start to be a bit more brave with the choice of colors as you grow as an artist. And so, like I mentioned, practice makes perfect. And so at this point, I'm starting to blend in the black outline of the sphere. And of course, continuing that circular brush stroke. And from time to time, like I mentioned in the beginning, you're going to dip the brush into the water. And again, that's just to keep the bristles of the brush loose so that it doesn't become too stiff. And so you'll find that you'll dip the brush into the water from time to time and clean it off on a napkin or a rag. But at this point, I'm kind of liking the blends that I have going. And I'm just going to highlight the top right part of the sphere. And then, of course, this is the part where it requires more patience because parts of the sphere are dry. And so I have to kind of make sure that if I am going to blend over a certain part, I have to mix the color on the palette, on the paint palette that you're using. And so, again, if this does not come out right the first time, that's okay. This is what acrylic does. And so if it doesn't come out, let it dry, clean the brush, and then paint over what you need to finish painting. Again, people think that these paintings come out beautiful the very first time, and that is not always the case. For the most part, any painting is a process. People only see the finished result. They never really see the in-between parts of the painting. They never really see the ugly part of the painting, as some artists call it, where it just looks like just blends of colors, and it doesn't really look like what you intended to look like until the very end. And so at this point in the sphere, you're just kind of getting comfortable with what you have on the canvas. And I'm adding a bit more white on that part of the sphere, on the highlighted part of the sphere. And so I want that white to really pop out, so I needed to add more white to it. But I still need to make sure that I have a subtle blend of the white to the gray. And so again, just patience, understanding the acrylic, the medium that you're using. And so at this point, I layered on a lighter gray towards the white highlight, and I'm blending in closer to the dark side of the sphere. And again, this just requires patience, and this looks smooth because of the foundation layer that we did. So because of the underpainting, the underpainting is the first layers of paint that you apply on the canvas, where it doesn't look as clean or as fancy. It's the first 5 to 10 minutes that you apply on the canvas. That's technically the underpainting. And so now that we have layers of paint underneath, it allows me to develop this final top coat of acrylic paint. And so I'm pretty happy with what I have so far. And while the paint is still wet, that's when you want to kind of go in and blend it as best and as smooth and as fast as you can. So you can see my palette, the paint's all over the place, but I try my best to kind of keep the black, the dark gray, the light gray, and the white separate. So I get a little bit closer to the canvas, and this is the cast shadow, and that's usually the darkest part. It depends on the painting and on the photo that you're using, but It's usually the darkest, and so I'm gonna go ahead and use black paint right out of the tube to fill that last part in. And I hope you enjoyed this introductory video on how to paint a sphere with black acrylic paint. I had fun, I hope you did, and I hope you enjoyed your process.